It began like any other Thursday evening. The soft hum of a ceiling fan, the faint scent of lavender candles, and the kind of golden light that makes even ordinary moments feel safe. Mark Dalton stood by the bedroom doorway, watching his wife pack for what she called a wellness retreat. Laura moved with careful precision, folding blouses, tucking in small bottles of lotion, humming along to a song only she could hear. She looked calm, confident, maybe a little too collected. 3 years of marriage had taught Mark to read between her movements, to notice the little shifts, the tone, the silence, the way her laughter stopped half a second too soon. He smiled softly. "You're really excited about this trip?" "Huh." She didn't look up. "It's just work. A little time to breathe." Her voice was light, almost rehearsed. And then he saw it. Nestled between a stack of folded shirts, a brand new red lingerie. Smooth, elegant, still with its tag. He froze. Not because it was there, but because of what it meant. Laura wasn't the kind of woman who bought things like that for a company retreat. Not for yoga and meetings by the lake. He lifted it slightly, as if the truth were fragile. "This looks new." She turned, eyes flashing. "Seriously, Mark, we're doing this again. I'm just asking," he said gently. "You've never. Work on your trust issues." She cut him off, zipping her suitcase with a final snap that sounded like a door closing. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "It's just lingerie. I wanted to feel good about myself." "Not everything is a conspiracy," Mark nodded, forcing a half smile. But his chest tightened. He wanted to believe her, to silence the whisper already rising in the back of his mind. But love, he realized, it doesn't erase instinct. It only makes you doubt it longer. Later that night, when the lights dimmed and her breathing settled beside him, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her words echoed softly, sharp as glass. "Work on your trust issues." And in that darkness, another voice answered quietly inside him, one that felt older, colder, and truer. Maybe trust isn't the problem. Maybe she is. Morning came dressed in calm, the kind of calm that looks harmless until you listen closely. Laura's heels clicked softly against the hardwood floor as she wheeled her suitcase toward the door. Her perfume, something floral, with a trace of citrus, lingered in the air long after she kissed Mark's cheek. "Don't overthink things," she said lightly, her voice as smooth as glass. "I'll text when I get there." Mark nodded. "Drive safe." The door closed. The sound of her car faded down the street. And for the first time in years, the house didn't feel like home. It felt like a story that had quietly ended a chapter. Without telling him, he stood in the kitchen for a long time, coffee growing cold between his hands, the silence stretching thin. There's a kind of silence that comforts, and then there's the kind that accuses. This one did both. He tried to shake it off. He told himself she deserved his trust, that marriages suffocate under suspicion. But the mind is a cruel echo chamber. Every word she'd said the night before, replayed like a stuck record. "It's just lingerie. I wanted to feel good about myself." "Work on your trust issues." She had sounded angry, not hurt. Defensiveness where there should have been reassurance. And it wasn't the lingerie that haunted him, it was the tone behind her smile. The way she seemed already halfway gone. He took a deep breath, trying to fill the room with logic. Not emotion. But logic had left with her suitcase. All that remained was a scent that wouldn't fade, and a question he couldn't bury. What if she's lying? Mark walked through their apartment slowly, seeing everything and nothing at once. The framed photo from their honeymoon. Their laughter, frozen in a time that felt foreign now. The mug she always used, left in the sink with a trace of lipstick. The bed made too perfectly. as if she'd been practicing for a life without him. He almost laughed at himself. "You're being paranoid," he muttered under his breath. "She's your wife." But the whisper in his chest disagreed. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't control. It was instinct, the quiet alarm every honest man hears when something sacred begins to crack. By noon, he tried to distract himself with work. He opened his laptop, skimmed through emails, tried to focus on code and numbers. But his mind refused to obey. Every logical thought dissolved into the same question. Why lie about lingerie for a wellness retreat? He clicked on her contact photo, Laura smiling by a lake last summer. It felt like a stranger now. His thumb hovered over the call button. He hesitated. If he called, he'd sound insecure. If he didn't, he'd stay haunted. He chose silence for now. The afternoon drifted by in fragments. A clock ticking too loudly. The washing machine cycling through its rinse. The world continuing as if it didn't care that his had just started to crumble. He scrolled through their text thread. The last message from her read, "I'll miss you." Babe. Normal words. Familiar words. But somehow, they didn't feel like hers. The punctuation was too neat. The tone too deliberate. He locked his phone and stared at the wall, realizing how frighteningly easy it is to fake warmth through a screen. Evening crept in, painting the windows gold. He poured himself another coffee just to have something to do with his hands. Love, he thought, isn't blind. It's patient. Too patient. It waits long after it should have walked away. The phone buzzed once, her name lighting up the screen. Just got here. The lake is beautiful. He smiled faintly. But something inside him didn't believe it. Somewhere between her words and his heartbeat, a truth whispered that no man wants to hear. When someone you love changes their tone, they've already changed their loyalty. Mark set the phone down and looked out the window. The sun dipped below the rooftops, leaving the sky the color of regret. He didn't know it yet. But this was the night trust would die quietly and doubt would begin to breathe. By the next morning, the house felt hollow. A quiet museum of their life together. The bed was still made from the night before. Her perfume had faded from the air, replaced by the clean scent of nothing. Mark Dalton sat at the kitchen counter, phone in hand, staring at the screen like it might answer the question circling his mind. He had promised himself not to call, not to check, not to be that husband. The paranoid one, the insecure one, the one who lets fear rewrite love. But sometimes, the truth doesn't knock politely. It scratches at the back of your thoughts until you have no choice but to open the door. He scrolled to her office, contact Everhart & Co. Marketing Group. His thumb hovered over the call button for a long moment before he finally pressed it. A man's voice answered, cheerful and unaware. "Good morning. Everhart." 2. Mark's throat felt dry. "Hi. This is Mark Dalton. My wife, Laura Dalton, works there. I just wanted to make sure she made it to the company retreat safely." There was a pause. The kind of pause that tightens your chest. The man cleared his throat. "Retreat. I'm sorry, sir. There's no retreat scheduled this month." Mark blinked. "No retreat. No. Sir. Everyone's working at the office today. Normal hours. Mrs. Dalton actually took personal time off. Said she had family matters to take care of." The words landed like quiet detonations. Personal time off. Family matters. He whispered a faint thank you and ended the call before his voice could betray the storm forming behind it. The world around him didn't explode. No thunder. No chaos. Just a steady hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of a clock, and the sound of his heartbeat slowing into disbelief. He sat there, staring at the wall. How quickly the familiar becomes foreign. How easily love turns into something unrecognizable. He wanted to deny it, to find some innocent explanation. But lies always carry a certain weight, and that weight was pressing down on him now. Heavy and absolute, minutes passed before his phone buzzed again. A message from Laura. Just arrived. Babe. The lake view is perfect. She added a photo, a luxury cabin by a still lake. Sunlight reflecting off the glass window. It looked serene. Expensive. Peaceful. But peace has a way of revealing what it hides. Mark zoomed in. His breath caught. In the reflection of the window, faint but unmistakable, stood the outline of a man. Broad shoulders. Dark jacket. Not him. For a moment, everything went still. The kind of stillness that comes before realization breaks you open. He didn't rage. He didn't throw the phone. He just stared. His pulse steadying into something colder than anger, because now he knew, sometimes betrayal doesn't shout. It whispers. It hides behind casual texts, careful smiles, and the tone of someone who's already gone. It lives in the smallest details and reflections. In timing. In the words that sound too smooth to be true. Mark set the phone down gently. The coffee beside him had gone cold again. But he didn't notice. His thoughts felt sharper. Clearer. The woman he loved hadn't left for healing or peace. She'd left for something else, something she didn't think he'd ever have the courage to uncover. But she was wrong. Trust can blind a man. But once that blindness lifts, there's no going back. Mark exhaled slowly, letting the truth settle in. It didn't feel like heartbreak. It felt like clarity. Like finally seeing a pattern that had always been there. Just out of sight, he looked toward the window. The light cutting across his face. Somewhere far away. She was laughing. Somewhere closer. A part of him was dying quietly, making room for someone new to be born. And though he didn't know it yet, that quiet calm in his chest wasn't numbness. It was the first breath of freedom. There comes a moment when anger burns itself out and something colder takes its place. Mark didn't shout, didn't call, didn't send a storm of questions she'd only lie through anyway. He stared at her photo one last time, the lake. The perfect sky. The reflection that had betrayed her, and began to type. I know what you're up to. Don't come back. 7 words. No punctuation of rage. No plea. Just a full stop at the end of a chapter that would never reopen. He hit send, locked his phone, and set it face down on the counter. Outside. The city pulsed softly, neon against concrete. Life moving forward, without waiting for anyone's heartbreak. He stepped out into that night. Coat unbuttoned. Hands deep in his pockets. The cold air stinging his skin. But it wasn't pain, it was clarity. He realized he didn't need an argument to close the book. Truth doesn't require noise. Sometimes, silence is the loudest goodbye, somewhere far away. Laughter floated through a cabin window. Laura sat across from her ex-boyfriend. Ryan, wine glass in hand. Her smile loose and unburdened. The kind of smile you wear when you think no one's watching. They toasted to freedom. To new beginnings. Words that sounded brave in the moment, but carried a cost she hadn't begun to understand. Her phone buzzed on the table. She ignored it at first. Then it buzzed again. A flicker of curiosity. A glance. A swipe. And then her world stopped. On the screen. The message stared back at her. I know what you're up to. Don't come back. The glass slipped from her hand and shattered against the wooden floor. Red wine spread across the rug. Dark and slow, like something bleeding out. Ryan frowned. Reaching toward her. Jess, what's wrong? But she didn't hear him. All the color drained from her face. Her throat tightened as if the air had turned to stone. She reread the words. Once. Twice. Again. Hoping they'd change. They didn't. Mark wasn't guessing. He wasn't bluffing. He knew, and in that moment, every lie she'd told, every excuse, every careless smirk folded in on itself. The retreat, the lingerie, the false confidence, all of it collapsed into a single, undeniable truth. Back in the city, Mark kept walking. The wind moved through the streets like a quiet witness. He didn't look at his phone again. Didn't need to. He had said everything he would ever say to her. There was no rage left to feel. Only a stillness, a sharp, haunting calm that felt almost sacred. He wasn't the broken one anymore. She was. And while she stared at that message, realizing she had finally met the version of him that wouldn't forgive, Mark simply kept moving forward, leaving the ashes of what once was, to rest in silence. It was a week before she came back, a week of pretending everything was fine, of long drives and half-honest smiles, of trying not to think about that message glowing on her phone. "I know what you're up to. Don't come back." She told herself it was bluff, that he'd cool down. Mark was steady, always had been. He'd wait. Forgive. Talk things through like the man she married. But when the elevator doors opened to their floor, the air felt wrong. Empty. Still, Laura unlocked her phone to text him that she was home. Then, she froze because the key wouldn't turn. She tried again. Harder. Nothing. Her pulse quickened. She knocked. Called his name. Whispered through the door. No answer. The hallway swallowed every sound. For a moment, she stood there in disbelief, like the world had shifted half an inch to the left. Then she noticed the nameplate beside the door. Dalton was gone. A blank space now stared back where their lives used to fit together. She stepped back, heart pounding. The apartment that once smelled of morning coffee and warm sheets now looked like it had erased her completely. She dialed his number. Straight to voicemail. Again. Again. Nothing. The realization came slowly, like a cold tide creeping up her legs. He'd changed the locks. Laura sank to the floor, back against the door that no longer belonged to her. The echo of her own breathing filled the hallway. She had imagined this moment differently, that if he ever found out, there'd be shouting, tears, accusations, something dramatic. But this was worse. Silence. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Mark dropped your things off earlier. He said it's over." The words blurred as she stared at them. Her hands trembled. Her chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. Over. That single word, small as it was, ended an entire world. She called her mother, hoping for comfort, for someone to tell her he didn't mean it. But her mother's voice was quiet. Careful. He looked calm. Honey. Too calm. Laura hung up without replying. The stillness in the hallway pressed against her ears. She could hear the hum of the lights above, the distant sound of someone's TV behind another door. Life going on as if nothing had ended at all. She wanted to scream, to pound on the door, to make him hear her. But she didn't. Somewhere deep down, she knew the truth. When a man goes quiet, it's not because he doesn't care. It's because he's finished. Her mind replayed their last morning together, the way he'd said, "Drive safe." The softness in his voice. That calm had been goodbye. And she hadn't seen it. Now it was all she could hear. She sat there for a long time, until exhaustion replaced panic. When she finally stood, her legs shook. She picked up her suitcase. That same suitcase she'd packed with confidence a week ago, and walked back down the hallway. Each step sounded like something closing behind her. Outside, the city lights blurred through her tears. She called him one last time. Voicemail again. She left no message. What could she say? That she was sorry, that it was a mistake. He wouldn't believe her, and maybe, for the first time, she didn't either. Later that night, she sat in her car, parked in front of the apartment building they once called home. Through the windshield, she watched the windows above, hoping to see him. A shadow, a light, anything. But the curtains stayed closed. Some men scream when they're broken. Others go silent. And that silence, it's not weakness. It's the sound of endings. Inside those walls, Mark moved quietly. Alone but untroubled. The spaces she once filled had been cleaned, rearranged, restored. Her photos boxed away. Her scent replaced by new air. He didn't check his phone. Didn't wonder where she was. The pain had burned out, leaving only clarity behind. He had learned what kind of peace comes after destruction, the kind that no apology can disturb. For Laura, the night stretched long and merciless. For Mark, it was the first quiet evening that truly belonged to him. Time doesn't stop when a marriage ends. It simply moves on without mercy. Weeks slipped by. And for Laura, each one felt heavier than the last. The man she'd risked everything for, Ryan, began to fade. His texts grew shorter. His tone, colder. "I've got a lot going on," he'd say. "Let's keep things simple." Simple. That word stung more than any insult. Within days, his messages stopped entirely. Her calls went unanswered. His social media showed a new woman carefree, untouched by scandal. For Laura, the silence that followed wasn't romantic or cleansing. It was punishment. Her affair, that thrilling escape she once called freedom, now felt like an open wound she'd carved herself. At work, whispers began. Colleagues who once smiled now avoided her in hallways. Coffee breaks ended when she entered the room. Someone had told the story, maybe Ryan. Maybe gossip carried by silence itself. In the sterile light of the office, she felt stripped of dignity. Her name now attached to something bitter. It's a strange thing, how betrayal echoes not just in hearts, but in reputations. Meanwhile, across the city, Mark lived differently. Not better out of pride, better out of peace. He woke early, made coffee in quiet rooms, took long walks before sunrise. He didn't talk about her. He didn't need to. His silence wasn't avoidance anymore. It was healing. He threw himself into work, finishing projects he'd neglected, rediscovering the satisfaction of control, not over people, but over his own direction. There was no anger left to sharpen him, just focus. One afternoon, while reading in a small cafe near his office, someone called his name. Mark. He looked up and saw Rachel Green, an old friend from years back. Bright eyes, calm presence, the kind of person who listened before she spoke. They talked easily, like two people who'd known each other in another lifetime. What began as polite conversation turned into shared laughter. Stories about old times, quiet reflections about life. For the first time in months, Mark didn't feel the weight of being left. He felt seen. Rachel didn't pity him. She didn't probe. She simply offered company that felt real, steady, warm, unfamiliar. They met again that week, and again the week after. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. It was something more fragile, more honest, the slow rebuilding of trust in human goodness. At the same time, Laura sat alone in her apartment, staring at her phone screen in the dark, waiting for messages that would never come. Her mother had stopped asking about Mark. Her friends had gone quiet. Even her own reflection looked like someone she didn't recognize, tired, older, empty. She tried to tell herself it was temporary, that life would right itself again. But deep down, she knew. You can't lie your way back to peace. Across the same city, Mark smiled faintly over a shared cup of coffee, sunlight warming the table between him and Rachel. There was no revenge in his eyes, no bitterness, Only gratitude that life had offered him another chance, not with someone new, but with himself. Some endings come with shouting. His came with silence. And from that silence, something better began to grow. The courtroom smelled of cold marble and old paper, the scent of endings dressed in formality. Laura sat across from Mark, her hands folded too tightly, her eyes darting between her lawyer and the floor. Mark didn't look at her. He didn't need to. He had already seen everything he needed to when she chose deceit over honesty. The judge read through the final documents, her tone steady and impartial. Mr. Dalton retains full ownership of the marital home, assets, and estate. Mrs. Dalton waives all claims to alimony. A gavel struck once. Just like that. 3 years of love were dissolved into silence and signatures. Laura's lawyer whispered something to her, but she barely heard it. Her face was pale, her voice gone. There was no outburst, no last plea. Only the quiet realization that she had gambled everything and lost. Mark gathered his papers, nodded respectfully to the court, and walked out. No triumph in his step. No satisfaction. Only finality. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. Outside, the air felt cleaner than it had in months. The city moved around him, indifferent and alive. He stood for a moment, breathing it in that strange mixture of freedom and grief that comes when a man finally stops carrying what was never his burden to bear. He didn't hate her. Not anymore. Hate requires energy, and he'd already given enough of that away. What he felt now was something sharper and quieter clarity. That evening, he met Rachel at their usual cafe. They spoke little, just shared the comfort of presence. Later, they walked along the riverfront as the sun sank behind the skyline, turning the water to gold. Their laughter was soft, unforced. Two souls who had both learned what it meant to lose and rebuild without bitterness. As the wind brushed against them, Mark realized he didn't miss his old life. He missed the man he used to be, the one who believed love required self-sacrifice. But that version of him had evolved. He understood now that love without respect isn't devotion, it's slow erosion. Rachel smiled at something small he said, her eyes kind, steady. In that simple moment, he felt something return, not the rush of romance, but the quiet dignity of being whole again. Voiceover peace doesn't come from revenge. It comes when you finally choose yourself. The city lights flickered against the water, and for the first time in a long while, Mark didn't look back. Not at the pain. Not at the lies. Not even at the woman who once tried to define his worth. He had found something stronger than forgiveness. He had found peace. And peace, once chosen, never asks for permission to stay. Night settled over the river like a slow breath. The water shimmered beneath the city lights, each reflection bending and breaking just like memories do when they finally stop hurting. Mark stood there quietly, hands in his pockets, watching the ripples shift and scatter. He wasn't angry anymore. Anger had burned out long ago, leaving only calm. Not the hollow kind that hides pain, the real kind that comes when a man stops fighting ghosts. He thought about the word betrayal, how it had once sounded like destruction, but now felt more like revelation. It hadn't ended his story. It had simply edited out the wrong character. He smiled faintly, because peace didn't arrive with fanfare or forgiveness. It came with stillness. The moment he realized he didn't owe anyone closure, he turned from the water, ready to walk forward into the unknown. For the first time, his life felt light, unchained, untangled. His own. Betrayal doesn't end your story, gentlemen. It just edits out the wrong character, and somewhere in that quiet, Mark found something far rarer than love: freedom. Men, if you were in Mark's shoes, would you confront her? Expose her? Or walk away, and let silence do the talking. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what peace looks like to you. And if this story hit home, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories like this, tales of truth, strength, and the quiet power of walking away, because sometimes silence says everything.